Hello, my name is Mitch Miller. I am a psychotherapist, and I like to make videos covering topics related to psychotherapy, psychology, and spirituality from a Christian and Catholic perspective. So today I want to talk about Jordan Peterson. So as a psychotherapist and as a Christian, I think I have a perspective on Jordan Peterson that some other people might not have. There's some good things about Jordan Peterson, some bad things. I want to talk about it. And basically what I think about Jordan Peterson from the perspective of a psychotherapist who is also a Christian. So if you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he's a public intellectual. He got really famous for making YouTube videos, particularly in regards to GLBT politics and stuff like that up in Canada, where he's from. He's a clinical psychologist and is kind of conservative voice in academia and things like this. And he talks a lot about mythology and religious sort of themes, and he sort of mixes in religious themes in with his psychology, in with his clinical psychology themes. He's written a couple of books where he talks about, kind of quasi-religious stuff and how it interacts with psychological themes and basically how to help people, live decent lives and be responsible human beings, which is great, right? Who doesn't want people to be more responsible and stuff like that? So I think that's cool. I think he's really smart. He makes a lot of interesting points and stuff. As a Roman Catholic myself, I think one of the things that was most impressive to me is he made a actually fairly cogent argument for his position on contraception, on the birth control pill. That's on YouTube. You can look for that. It's a pretty good video. I won't discuss whether his arguments are, conclusive or anything like that. I won't critique his arguments, but I'd say by and large they're pretty cogent from even a secular perspective, and they're far more cogent than most of the arguments I've heard from theologians. And he's not even a theologian, so that's pretty cool. He's a really smart guy. I think, let's see, he's got just a lot of really interesting things to say about religion and psychology in general. First off, most important thing to know about Jordan Peterson, I think, is that he is a Jungian. So Carl Jung was a disciple of Sigmund Freud, and Sigmund Freud, everybody knows, was an atheist, but Carl Jung was a kind of a intellectual religious person, and he tried to sort of baptize Freudian psychology and make it like religiously palatable and show how there are religious themes that sort of coalesce and sort of correlate within psychology and sort of fit nicely with psychoanalysis and stuff like that. It's some interesting stuff. Carl Jung studied mythology. He studied world literature. He was like a really well-read guy, really wide breadth of knowledge. And he liked to show how like certain myths sort of point to the same realities or psychological truths and stuff like that. Problem with Carl Jung is he's a syncretist. He likes to like take characters from one myth and one culture and sort of map them onto another character in another culture and sort of just say, oh, this myth is saying the same thing as this other myth. But you really have to, some of the analyses he does of these mythologies are kind of tortured analyses to sort of make the text say what he wants it to say. And I think that by and large, that's probably my number one criticism of Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is a syncretist. He talks a lot about religious themes. But he kind of likes to sort of lump all religions together and make them all sort of say the same thing. And that's common nowadays, and that was common back in the early days of Christianity. There were syncretists, there were Gnostics. Bishop Robert Barron has a video where he kind of points out Gnostic tendencies within Jordan Peterson. And if you don't know what Gnosticism is early strain of thought within Christianity that was deemed a heresy. There were a lot of Gnostic Christians in the first few centuries, like 1, 2, 3 centuries of the church, until about the time of Christ, all the way up until maybe like 400 or 500 AD. And there's still some Gnostic Christians today. And there's all kinds of just different weird things that the Gnostics believed that are definitely and clearly not Christian, and they've been ruled so by ecumenical councils and by saints and by popes and by biblical scholars and stuff like that. So we know that Gnosticism is not okay. If you're curious about what that means, do your research, because there's no way I'm going to finish covering all that in one video. The next biggest thing I want to kind of talk about with Jordan Peterson, he has really interesting and kind of strange things to say about belief. So people go up to Jordan Peterson and say, Jordan Peterson, you talk a lot about religion. Do you believe in God? And Jordan Peterson will, inevitably say something kind of like this. Well, I behave as though God existed. And because I don't think we know what we mean when we say we believe something. He says, I don't think we understand what the word belief means, what it even means to say that you believe in something. And so I don't think that beliefs, words are a good expression of what a person actually believes. That actions and behaviors are a better expression of what someone actually believes. Okay, so super interesting. On one level of analysis that sounds like true, like actions speak louder than words. Yes, yeah, that for sure. But okay, so where is the distinction between actions and words? Like, where is that line? Okay, so when I say I believe in God the Father, the Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, when I start saying the Apostles' Creed, that's a behavior, that's an action. In the history of the Catholic Church, we would call that an act of faith. It's a speech act and an act of faith. So how can you distinguish that from a belief? When you pray, that's all speech. Even if you're just keeping the words up here, that's all speech. When we think of the creation of the world, we think of the creation of the world as coming forth through an act of speech. In the beginning, God said, let there be light, and there was light, and the light was good. And that's super important for the idea of revelation, that God could reveal himself to humanity, because he reveals himself through language, through human language. That's crazy to think that God could put truth, embed truth, encode truth that transcends language into language. It's like, how do you encode, love into binary code? How do you express the program of love into binary, digits? You can't. It's not possible. But that's the analogy here. It's like God encoded his truth into human language, into something that transcends all possible thought. God was able to sort of put a shadow of that in human language. And that's why we have Scripture. That's why Jesus came to earth in the very incarnation of God himself and spoke Aramaic and spoke Hebrew and spoke Greek. That's God literally speaking in human language. And not in some metaphorical sense, in like a very earthy flesh and blood sense. That's God in the person of Jesus Christ, with a tongue and teeth and a palate and a larynx and all that kind of stuff, speaking human language and conveying truth through that. And we are supposed to believe, if we're going to be Christians, we're supposed to believe in the truth that is conveyed through that language. So I think that that's kind of problematic if you're going to make this really hard distinction between expressing beliefs through language and expressing beliefs through behaviors. I don't know if his distinction holds up to scrutiny. Granted, Jordan Peterson is far more intelligent than I am, and he might see something that I don't see. However, I think I might understand where he's coming from. on one level at least. In my days as an evangelical, I used to be an evangelical, and I remember thinking, well, God says if you believe, you will be saved. I'm like, okay, so how do I know I believe? It's kind of strange because you know, when you're an evangelical, you get in the habit of being really, really concerned about things like salvation and stuff like that, or Protestant in general. You really, really, really think about salvation a lot. And so is there like some switch out there in cosmic space, some metaphysical switch that just goes, you know, oh, well, Mitch believes, boom, done, okay. And how do I know whether that switch has actually been flipped or not? Like, how do I know what I believe? What happens? And I remember just having a hard time believing, because believing certain things is just simply difficult. Even whether it's religious things or scientific things, there are certain things that are just hard to believe. And it can be either for lack of evidence, or just because, like, even if you showed me that there was all the evidence in the world, like you could give me a really concrete case that there's all the evidence in the world that I would die some horrible death, it's still hard to believe. Like, you think about people who have alcoholism, you know, think about denial. Like, some things are just simply in and of themselves hard to believe. It's hard to believe that I have cancer. It's hard to believe that I'm an alcoholic. It's hard to believe that I have AIDS. It's hard to believe that my spouse or my parent or my child just died. That's hard to believe. That's why people struggle with those things. It's hard to believe. And I think religious and scientific things can equally be hard to believe. And it's not necessarily for lack of evidence. It's because belief takes work. Belief takes thought, takes energy. But at what point do you know you actually believe in something? So at what point do I know I actually believe that the earth revolves around the sun? Do I really believe that? How would I test whether I believe that or not? Is it just enough for me to be able to say, yeah, I believe the earth revolves around the sun? Do I believe that 2 + 2 is 4? Do I believe that, I don't know, this scientist is reputable, or that this this idea is true or false? Or that, do I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Like, how do you test whether, it's hard to really come to a final conclusion about that. And I think maybe where he's coming from on one level is seeing how difficult it is to know what you believe. There is no good litmus test on that level of what you believe. And that's why, there's some people out there in the world who have a lot of anxiety about whether or not, they'll go to heaven or hell, for instance, because they worry about doubt and about things like that, questioning their faith or stuff like that. And that some people obsess about those kind of things because they don't know if they've ever actually committed themselves fully. So I think that's where he's coming from. Lastly, I want to kind of sum up by saying there is another person who is, I think, even smarter than Jordan Peterson, that says a lot of the same things that Jordan Peterson says, but I think he says them better, more succinctly. And guess what? This person is actually a Christian. Okay, this person is C.S. Lewis. Okay, so C.S. Lewis studied mythology. He studied world literature. He understood Freudian and Jungian psychology, studied the passions, studied the emotions, knew these things inside and out, understood natural law. He wrote a phenomenal book called The Abolition of Man, about natural law. And he calls natural law the Tao, T-A-O, as in like Taoism. So he had studied these things. He had studied world religions. And he was able to succinctly and in a very Christian way express similar things to what Jordan Peterson says, but without any sort of heretical or quasi-heretical things bleeding through. So if you like Jordan Peterson and you are a Christian and want to really be a Christian or committed to that, I recommend that you sort of read him next to C.S. Lewis. and see what differences you notice. Read Paralandra, his C.S. Lewis's space trilogy. Read C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. Read C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters and Mere Christianity. And probably, I think, C.S. Lewis's best work, The Great Divorce. Read these things and see how C.S. Lewis integrates mythology and the science of the passions, a very deep and very human psychology, very dynamic psychology, which is very largely inherited from St. Augustine, but particularly Christian, and committed to the idea that there was a distinct person who came to earth and was human and divine at the same time, and that was Jesus Christ. And not syncretistic, not trying to say, strange things about how all religions are all sort of pointing to the same thing, which are just sort of like convenient and popular to say these days. No, but like unabashedly, unashamedly, and unapologetically Christian. This is the belief that I have, and I'm not going to try to hem and haw about it or make it something that it's not. I sometimes get that sense from Jordan Peterson that he's trying to present his message in a contemporary context, and that makes some religious truths more palatable than they ought to be, because some religious things are hard to believe because they're extreme, they're intense, they should sound crazy, they should sound difficult. They're meant to be wrestled with. They're meant to be ruminated over and struggled with. They're not meant to be easy answers. They're not meant to be just accepted like 2 + 2 = 4 and you move on with your life. No, they're meant to be things that you continue to struggle with over and over and over in your life. The same way you would continue to struggle against, say a big temptation in your life, or continue to struggle against a major fault in yourself and try to raise yourself up to be something better than your fallen humanity would tend to make you into. Jordan Peterson, cool things to say. By and large, I think the C.S. Lewis says most of the same things, not all the same things, but most of the same basic philosophical things in a far more theologically correct way. If you guys have any questions, comments, or scathing rebuttals, please feel free to respond and let me know. I'll see you guys at my next video. Bye.